Men are in decline. We have less men going to college, less men in the workforce, more men living at home, less men dating. I do think that we have a real crisis.
Are we getting better or worse?
I think it's a tough time, man, to be a young guy. There's a lot of paradoxes within our modern culture. The OnlyFans woman that's making millions of dollars off of a man is praised for being, sexually liberated, but then the man who's paying the money to watch and use the OnlyFans woman is a disgusting pig. We as men are kind of very linear and logical, right? And so it's the rest of this relationship's okay, but the sex part really isn't there, and so I'll just go get that from over here. Porn kind of creates a pseudo attachment. It's just like this beautiful reset button for your brain and your body. You feel like crap, you're angry, you're frustrated, you had a shitty day, you're stressed out, and you're like, I don't like this, I don't like feeling like this. You can go watch porn, get off, and you feel good for a brief period of time. And that is no different than weed, alcohol, cocaine, or whatever it is. Part of replacing addiction is by reintroducing healthy relationship.
Without London Real, I wouldn't have my sobriety. Without London Real, I wouldn't have my children. Without London Real, I wouldn't have so many things in my life. And so I kind of reverse engineered that somehow, because with London Real, I was kind of forced to create all these human relationships that I had avoided.
When you get around other men that really are living exceptional lives and they're showing up in exceptional ways, it gives you something aspirational to move towards. And that is at the heart and soul of our masculine core, in my belief.
The world is changing. Inspiration is everywhere. It has never been so easy to connect, share, and bring people together. We're learning from others and finding the best in ourselves. Challenging our beliefs. Sharing our vulnerability. Overcoming our fears. Transforming ourselves so we can transform the world. How far can we go?
This is London Real. I am Brian Rose. My guest today is... This is London Real. I am Brian Rose. My guest today is Connor Beaton, the entrepreneur, best-selling author, and keynote speaker. You are the founder of ManTalks, an international organization focusing on improving the lives and relationships of men, with the goal to better understand the challenges men face in today's world. Your book, Men's Work, is a practical guide to confront one's inner darkness, overcome self-sabotage, and gain a sense of freedom and purpose. Here, you've developed an innovative approach to healing the shadow, a concept that addresses the hidden parts of ourselves that contribute to our struggles. You said there is an epidemic of man-shaming within society, as well as a lack of authentic support, leading many men to feel isolated, purposeless, and disconnected. Your mission is to help men reclaim their inner strength, confront their shadow, and live with greater purpose, clarity, and connection. Connor, welcome back to London Real.
Thanks for having me back.
Look, it's great to have you. I think we spoke 8-9 months ago, and we went pretty deep on all sorts of things. I think I was, telling you about a lot of my life, and you were kind of breaking down. And honestly, Connor, you helped me see some things in a different way that I hadn't really looked at before, from, drink and drug abuse to my experience as hazing as a fraternity. And we really covered a lot of amazing ground, but we didn't get even into some of the more interesting things that define us as men, or even reflect to us who we are as men, like relationships and mothers and all these other things. So I can't wait to dive a little bit deeper today.
Beauty. I'm ready.
When you bump into someone on the street or on the bus and they say, what do you do? What do you tell them?
It depends on my mood. But essentially I just say that I run a men's mental health company. And, our slogan is, it's not therapy, it's training. And so essentially it's, helping men grow deeper into themselves, not grow up, but actually grow deeper into who they are and who they actually want to be. So that's that's usually what I say. If I'm just messing around, I'll say like I make men cry. I'll just joke around, stuff like that. But for the most part, it's that. It's helping men grow deeper into themselves, giving them the tools, the resources that oftentimes modern therapy is actually not giving them.
Powerful. For me, I think about this a lot because my two boys are now 8 and 9. So like I really am looking straight at it. And first of all, I've got a direct reflection of how I'm doing as a father and introducing concepts of masculinity. And also I'm watching in real time 2 young men develop into men. So I've got that going on. I've also still have relationships with my father and all sorts of other people. So it's pretty interesting how it's all kind of happening in real time, and it gives me a lot to think about and focus on, for sure.
Yeah. Well, I mean, 8 to 9 is a very interesting time, especially for a lot of young boys, where it's like the prepubescent time. And I mean, this is maybe a interesting fact, but maybe something for all the parents to think about. 8 to 11 is the what the research shows is the general age that young boys are now finding porn. And so if you have an 8 and 9-year-old boy, it's probably close to that time, if not that time already, to have that conversation of what pornography is, because a lot of young boys are finding it so early. It's like so accessible. And it's a big struggle for a lot of parents of like, when do I talk to my boys about this? How do I talk to my boys about this? Do I talk to my boys about this? And so yeah, just throw that out there for you.
Good point. Let's drill right into that. How do you talk to your boys about that?
I mean, I think a couple of things, depending on the relationship that you have with your boys, one of them is to talk about the ease of acquisition. And I probably wouldn't use the word acquisition. I'd probably say something along the lines of, you can find some things on a phone or an iPad or a computer that maybe you're not ready for, and to open the door for conversation. So what I would probably say to my son when he turns 8 or 9, number one, I would say, I'm always here to talk to. If you get hit with something, or if you find something, or you come across something that, just you don't even know how to deal with, or it just feels like it's too much for you, or if it feels like it's something that you want to hide, like that's probably a good time to come and talk to me about those types of things. So that's number one. Number two, I would have some type of a conversation with them, or how you would have that conversation with your kids, have some type of conversation with them about sex and what it actually means, whatever your family system makes it mean. Every family system is a little bit different, but have a conversation with them about what sex is, the role that it plays, the sanctity of it, and to some degree, and then to be able to have a conversation of, you can go and watch porn, but it's going to mess up your perspective of sex. And the analogy, because I'm from Canada, so I'm going to give you a Canadian analogy, is you can watch hockey, but it's very different to go play hockey. And so having a basic analogy for kids can be very, very helpful to get them to just understand, like, you could go and watch this and it'll be enticing and you can get hooked on it. And it'll be something that, you struggle with or just deal with in silence. And it's not to shame them, of course, but, the real thing's better, and encouraging them to just go down that path safely.
So it's a tricky conversation to have because, like you said, you kind of have to talk about a lot of things that maybe they're not even mentally ready to talk about. It's almost like, because it's so accessible, and like most parents, they live in oblivion, right? Oh no, my kids haven't seen that. But like, if we really honest with ourselves, they're seeing it 2 or 3 years before you think they will, maybe more, right? Yeah. So if I'm really honest with myself, they probably have already seen something, right?
100%.
Right.
100%. I spoke at an all-boys school because I do a lot of public speaking, and I spoke at an all-boys school. There's 600 kids, right? And it's middle school and high school. And so, pretty, not like grade 1, but I think about grade 4 or 5. All the way up to grade 12. And they had all the boys on the lower levels. So there's 600 boys, and I'm on stage in front of the boys. And then in the rafters are some of the parents and all of the teachers. And, I was talking about being a man and, masculinity and these types of pieces. And I had a slide that I turned to in the slide, and I had passed this with, the parents and the teachers first. Like I'd given them my slide deck. I was like, I'm going to talk about this. And so it just turned to a slide that said porn. And of course, all of the boys were like, oh, all erupts. And I was like, okay, I'm going to get all the parents and all the teachers to turn their backs. And so all the parents that are up in the second floor and all the teachers, they turn their backs. And I say to the boys, okay, real talk. How many of you have actually watched porn? And I kid you not, 95% of the boys put their hands up out of 600 kids, right? From grade 4 or 5 up to, grade 12. So the majority of those kids, if you think your boys haven't seen it, they probably have. It's really one of those things where, and the interesting thing is that the research shows that it's oftentimes it's not them searching for it. Either they stumble across something, they're at a friend's house and, a friend's older sibling has shown it to them or whatever it is. But oftentimes somebody else is showing them the pornography. And so it is good to get a sense of, having some dialogue with your kids about it.
It's just crazy. Like you said, then you're talking about sex, which is probably maybe a good time to talk about that. But then you're talking about the sanctity of it. I mean, that gets really deep into relationships and all that, which is, stuff that maybe that cortex isn't necessarily ready to grasp. So it puts you in a difficult situation these days, right? Because of these, I guess, digital files and digital devices where you have to have that conversation with people maybe before they're really ready.
Yeah, anytime you're talking to kids, it's best to just use super simple language. It's like, this is special, and this is easy to access. And I think the more that you can make it very simple and very straightforward, and I think the challenge is that for most parents, it's uncomfortable for them. Maybe it's uncomfortable for the kid, but if the kid, is sort of doesn't really know a lot, it's not going to be super uncomfortable for them. It might be a little strange, like, oh, mom and dad had to talk with me. But use super simple language, and you're right, try and keep it within the context of what do I think my kid understands. And sometimes the best thing to do is to ask, to inquire, like, what do you know about? Have you ever heard of this word before? Have any of your friends ever used the word pornography? Have they ever talked about sex before? And sometimes that type of just opening the door for you and your child to have a conversation about what they already know might surprise you.
Yeah. Okay. That'll be happening on Sunday. Thanks for that. I still remember one of my first experiences with porn. Look, I just turned 54, so there was obviously no internet back then, and it would have had to have been a videotape. And I remember I saw something. I was 14 or 15 was the first time I saw like video porn, and it really shocked. I wasn't ready for it. I was like, "What the hell is that?" It was really like, "Whoa!" And then back then you really would struggle to get access to like video stuff. And then when I got to the fraternity house, it was there, but we kind of moved on at that point. But so I really don't have context to how much of a issue it is, today. And I know quite a few people that speak about this as well, including Sadia Khan. She's a friend of mine. She speaks on this kind of from her perspective, and she thinks it's one of the biggest problems out there,
Yeah, I would agree. I've been working with men for over a decade now. And, my organization has worked with tens of thousands of guys. And I can tell you that it's a huge issue for a lot of men. And it's not every single man. Doesn't mean that every single man has a problem with porn. But the majority of people are watching it. Women are now watching it more as well. I think for a lot of guys, because they find it so early, it does skew their perspective of what sex should look like, how they should perform in sex. And it kind of takes out the how do I want to operate, during sex part of it and the exploration. And so, if you think about it, if a boy finds porn at, 8, 9, 10 years old, he hasn't even hit puberty yet. He can't even really do those things. So it really alters their perspective of, oh, this is what sex should be. This is how sex should look. And for some people, depending on when they find it, it can really replace real intimacy and sex in a relationship. I see a lot of couples struggling, when they struggle, the man, sometimes the woman, but oftentimes the man will just turn to porn. And so sex will start to decrease in the relationship because the guy's not really trying to initiate. He kind of falls into this pattern of like, what's the point anyways? Why should I bother? And then there's this, this thing that he can turn to that never rejects him, never turns him down, is always available. And so it's very easy access. And when you think about it, the average man, I mean, even a young guy can sit down and watch pornography for however long and see more naked women than pretty much any man throughout the course of the entire human history, right? The greatest kings in the past, you can watch pornography for an hour or two and see more women naked than any single man will have seen throughout his lifetime, throughout human history. And so I think it definitely, skews your sense because it just inundates your brain. It inundates your mind, and it alters your perspective of what sex should be.
I do struggle to see how it's a replacement for intimacy, digital files. I can see that there's a lot going on there with the brain and that it could be, and then also maybe if you started early, there could be some weird things going on. But again, I maybe there's a correlation with relationships going southwise with physical intimacy, but I personally don't see the causation or replacement. But then again, you see a lot more of this than me.
Well, can I speak to that just really
Please.
quick? I think that's probably important, which is, we're attachment-based creatures. I think we touched on this last time. Like we are relationship social creatures. And so we are literally designed and built to be in relationship with people. And we have very specific needs that we desire from relationships. And when we get into an intimate relationship and there's a part of that attachment that's not working, it's, we as men are kind of very linear and logical, right? And so it's like, well, the rest of this relationship's okay, but the sex part really isn't there. And so I'll just go get that from over here. And so, one, it kind of solves a problem that we think that we have. And number two is porn kind of creates a pseudo attachment, and it mimics and sort of mirrors, and what you'll see in certain men's pornography usage behavior is that who they're talking to and the type of porn that they're watching is mirroring some type of connection that they're wanting in their relationship. It's some type of expression that they're wanting in their relationship. It's a part of them that they're wanting their wife or their girlfriend to know, but they're afraid to bring it in. They don't know how to bring it in. They feel like they're going to get rejected for bringing it up in their relationship, but they can go and do that in porn, or they can pay an OnlyFans girl to, shoot a video for them and do exactly what they want. So porn creates this pseudo attachment with almost zero risk and zero rejection, right? You can ask for and do and say whatever you want. And for the most part, you're going to quote unquote get your needs met. So I think that's why for a lot of people, it's very enticing. And then there's the neurochemical side of it, which is it creates a dependency. So the more that you watch it, the more you get a dopamine hit that basically incentivizes you to return to it. And what ends up happening for a lot of men is that porn turns into, I call it the great reset button, right? It's just like this beautiful reset button for your brain and your body. You feel like crap, you're angry, you're frustrated, you had a shitty day, you're stressed out, you feel alone, bored, depleted, whatever it is that you feel something internally and you're like, I don't like this, I don't like feeling like this. You can go watch porn, get off, and what happens in your brain is a whole slew of neurochemicals like dopamine, like prolactin will flow out through your brain, relax your body, make you feel good, wipe away that sort of angry tension, frustration that was there before, and you feel good for a brief period of time. Now, eventually that state will likely come back in because, your life hasn't actually changed. You've just watched some porn and got off. But it tricks your body into thinking, oh, this is a great way for me to feel better. And so for a lot of men, what ends up happening is this very subtle addiction starts to creep in where anytime they feel something internally that they do not like, porn is there to help them feel better and they turn to it. And so for a lot of guys, what you'll see is, some men literally watch porn every single day. Some men watch porn in order to wake up in the morning and get out of bed. Some men watch porn in order to go to bed at night. And oftentimes in these, what I'm talking about is a little bit more extreme cases, but oftentimes
Investment Club. Today, I consider it the best investment that I've ever made. We get 4 projects presented a week by their associated CEOs. Personally, I'm completely blown away by the quality of these projects, and I know of nowhere else where I would be given this same opportunity. Each week that passes, I feel more appreciative of the fact that I'm a member of this group. The vibe was just tremendous. Everybody's on the same wavelength. We just clicked. Everybody listened to each other, enjoyed their company. It was just magical, magical. Take action. Don't take my word for it. Due diligence you need to do. And I really hope that someday down the road I see you in the club. It far exceeded expectations, without question.
In these more extreme cases, guys have built a dependency on pornography to help them deal with some type of internal state that they don't like. And that is no different than weed or, alcohol or cocaine or whatever it is, right? You do that substance to help you feel better internally and to feel like there's some type of connection. So we trade human attachments, we trade human relationships for these substances, objects, and behaviors. That's basically what addiction is, right? We trade relationship with another person with a substance, an object, or a behavior, and that becomes what we're attached to. So instead of being attached to you or my wife or whatever, addiction means I'm attached to this substance, object, or behavior instead of being in right relationship with somebody else.
Very interesting. I mean, coming from a former addict, or I guess you could say I'm always an addict, depending on how you look at it or what meetings you go to, then I can see that, because that's why I used to drink and that's why I used to do drugs. But also, I would say one thing you didn't mention is that after you're dabbling with the porn there, if you're honest with yourself, you feel even worse after that than you did when you started. Now, of course, same with alcohol, same with heroin, same with all these other things. And if you're smart enough to see that, because I've seen it, because I've gotten all of those things, then I can see it and they'd be like, but you're going to do that thing that you think is going to make you feel better, but it's going to make you feel worse. So maybe don't do that thing. But the only reason I can maybe have that conversation with myself is because I went down that wrong road for decades with the substances. So now I can kind of look at it and be like, you know what? You're playing yourself. Or as one of my famous guests said, you're trying to find happiness in the exact place where you lost it. That's what he says. I love that quote. Love that quote. And so you go back to do this, that's where you lost it, and you're trying to find happiness again, and of course it doesn't work. But I could see how that could happen. I guess that could happen about a lot of behaviors. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's, I always say we don't sabotage to get out of control. We sabotage to regain a sense of control. It's a very big misconception about sabotage. We think, I text that girl, I watch the porn, I do the drugs in order to feel out of control again. Now, that whole pattern of sabotage, the whole thing is baked into your brain, from what's going to happen before you do the drug or, text that person that you shouldn't text, to when you go through with it, to right after, to the morning after. The whole cycle is played out in your head. And so sabotage is a way for us to move back into patterns that we recognize, right? Your brain is a pattern recognition machine, and it will always choose the patterns that it knows over the patterns that are foreign. So if what your brain knows is dysfunction, it will choose that dysfunction. Even though you're like, I know this isn't good for me. I know I'm going to feel like crap tomorrow. I know this is going to take me down a peg, and I'm going to resent the fact that I texted this person or, had that extra drink or whatever it is. But it will move you towards that pattern because that's known. So we have to work we actually have to work kind of against our wiring, which wants to move us back towards patterns that are known, which are oftentimes, addictive behaviors, sabotaging behaviors that are not good for us, that we don't actually want. And in doing that, and I think one of the parts of AA that is really beneficial, that sort of ties into what we're talking about, and that, is about addiction. My good friend and mentor, Dewey Freeman, says, we're wounded in relationship. We have to heal in relationship. And the big challenge with any type of addiction is that you get hooked on something and you build this really strong bond with that subject or object or behavior. You build a relationship with the drug or the porn or the, the alcohol or the gambling. And then there's a community usually around that behavior. Not always, right? With the porn, maybe there's not a community, but there's other women, right? There's other people that are involved in it. And so you kind of have this relationality that plays out within this addiction. And part of what needs to happen is that in order to let go of the addiction, you have to, part of replacing addiction is by reintroducing healthy relationship. And so if you look at AA, what you'll find is a huge part of it is you've got the person that you call, you talk to them every single day, and you go to meetings. And so what they've done is they are just replacing this behavioral pattern of using a drug or using a substance or, alcohol or whatever it is with genuine relationship, where when that experience internally that you dislike starts to come up, I want to blow things up, I'm angry, I'm sad, I'm alone, I don't like how my life looks. Instead of turning to the substance, you turn to an actual person. You turn to a relationship. So in many ways, healthy, secure relationships are the antidote to, we could say, the poison of addiction. I think that might be a little bit too harsh, but it's the antidote to addictive behaviors.
Yeah, powerful. Again, you're knocking me out. You're knocking me out here, Connor, because I always say that without London Real, I wouldn't have my sobriety. Without London Real, I wouldn't have my children. Without London Real, I wouldn't have so many things in my life. And so I kind of reverse engineered that somehow, because with London Real, I was kind of forced to create all these human relationships that I had avoided in the past. And in the past, I would just go to the drink because, that was just convenient and I knew that pattern. But with London Real, I started developing all these amazing relationships and I was connected. Also, a lot of alcoholics will tell you they feel disconnected from the world, and that pain, maybe they're just trying to get over from that day. A lot of times they feel really separated from the world. And then when they're in their alcoholic stupor, it doesn't hurt as much. So for me, it was like building all of those relationships over many, many years that I think allowed me to just walk away from it at the end. And I think that's the only reason. There's no way I could have done it without the show, which forced me to have so many relationships, from the team to my guests to the fans to just everything, that I just evolved out of it. And that's why I didn't go to AA or any of these other things. It just kind of got to a point where it just fell away. And I made a conscious effort, but then I could do it. But it was only because of those relationships, Connor. I hadn't really thought about the details of that. But yeah, I'd say that's very accurate.
I'm with you, man.
Powerful.
I'm right there with you. I struggled with a bunch of different, addictive behaviors. Booze was never really the big one for me, but, I think really letting myself, when I started ManTalks, it was a in-person event where we brought people together to share their stories, and men would come up and share their stories, and it just evolved from there. And so, I think a part of it was that I always struggled to bring all of me into any relationship. I didn't have very good attachment. I keep coming back to that word, but, I do think it's important. I had, pretty avoidant attachment tendencies, meaning that I avoided expressing what I wanted, what I needed, who I was in relationship. I would lie a lot. I would hide in my relationships, and then I would just venture outside of the relationship and get what I wanted met, outside of that. So infidelity was huge for me. It was a big, big, big struggle. And pornography was as well. But it wasn't until I started to bring myself more fully into relationships and build a community where it was like, oh, I do belong here. I can belong. I can show up and people rely on me. I'm responsible for things. That all of that really started to shift and change. And so again, relationship is the antidote to addiction. It's not the only antidote. We do need other pieces. We need to have some type of a mission, some type of purpose. We have to make the choice to get clean. All of those things, all the 12 steps that you can go through. But relationship certainly is one of the most integral parts. And what I've seen with a lot of men is because, and this is where porn is insidious, it is the most socially acceptable addiction there is, maybe even outside of drinking. Like drinking's pretty socially acceptable, but when you start to get off the rails, everybody's like, oh, I don't know. Like you're making a mess of yourself. You're showing up, at work drunk. Nobody knows if you're sitting at home watching porn for 3 hours by yourself. Nobody really knows that. And so it's so easy to hide. It's so easy to hide. If you have a heroin addiction, you're going to struggle with, your work.
It's hard. It's hard.
Porn addiction, it's kind of unseen, so it's really this ghost in the background for a lot of men's lives. And, again, for some guys, it's not that big of a deal. They watch it once in a while, maybe they watch it once a week or once a month, and it's like kind of not really that big of a thing. But for many men, it is a much bigger problem than that.
Yeah. It reminds me of the people I used to see that could have a glass of wine at dinner once a week. And I'd be like, I don't understand that. I want to have 40 of those right now. And so, as Brad Pitt once said, he got his drinking privileges revoked, and so did I, and thank God. It's interesting. You talked recently a lot about anxious attachment and disorganized attachment, and I guess we might as well jump in on that now because I'm curious if you could tell us more about that. It's interesting. I was talking to a friend many years ago, and he was struggling to find, I guess, the love and intimacy in his relationship, and he was going elsewhere. And at one point, he said, do you feel love? Do you feel enough love, or do you have to go find it too? And I immediately thought of my community, and I was like, man, I feel so much love. It's not actually, it's not, this man-woman love. That it was just so much love from all these different members and the relationships I had with the guests and my community. And I was just like, I feel like I have tons of love, even if, it wasn't relationship based. And it was just something interesting to note that he was struggling with one thing, and I was seemingly to replace that with something that wasn't even obvious that it could work for him. And I don't know if that has anything to do with the attachment things that you talk about, but it just came to my mind.
Yeah, we all have some, this attachment work, I think, is one of the best things that's come out of the therapeutic industry or the psychological industry. Outside of maybe Carl Jung, I think the OG Carl Jung is still, I think some of the stuff that he created was phenomenal. But there's a ton of work that was done by John Bowlby and the like. And what they found was that in the first few years of your life, predominantly in the first few years of life, it can be interrupted and changed as you grow and develop. But mostly in the first sort of 3 to 5 years of your life, your attachment style is going to start to form to your caregivers, right? To mom, dad, whoever your caregivers are. And ideally, what we want is a secure attachment, and that secure attachment is based off of a few different things. Number one is the trust and the understanding that our needs matter and our needs can be met by somebody else, right? So your needs matter, your needs can be met by somebody else. The second thing is that you can go through a tough time in relationship with somebody else and come out the other side okay, right? So we can go through hardship, we can disagree. I can try and express that I need something and maybe I'm not doing it right. And so you kind of misinterpret it and it leads to a conflict, but we come out the other side okay, even if that doesn't happen, right? And we can circle back and we'll try again. So these are some of the basic building blocks of what creates attachment. It's a healthy, secure attachment. And my good friend Dewey Freeman has a great attachment cycle that kind of explains the whole thing. But essentially when we're young, we have needs, right? We need to be taken care of by other people. And we express those needs when you're a baby, like my daughter, who's 10 months old. She kicks, she screams, she cries, she acts adorable. She does all these things. It gets my attention, gets her attention. And we try and figure out, what does she need? And as a kid, it's pretty simple because, she either needs food, she needs a diaper change, she needs to be held and loved. That's kind of it. And when those needs are met, what happens is a child will learn, oh, my needs matter. I can communicate my needs effectively, and the world's okay. The world's a safe place to be. People care about me. That cycle for infants plays out something like 30, 40 times an hour, right? So if you're around an infant, around a baby, they're just doing that constantly, right? They're trying to get your attention, et cetera. So as we get older, this attachment cycle just evolves, but essentially it evolves around the same thing. I need food, I need interaction, I need communication, I need expression. I need to be able to express myself in relationship and have it be received. I need to be able to ask for what I need in relationship and have it be received. And so as we get older, this same cycle still plays out, and that forms secure attachment. Now, if we have interruptions, it will create, and there's different labels, right? Anxious attachment, avoidant, disorganized, fearful, those types of pieces. So as we have interruptions, it will create these behaviors. And I can give you sort of like high level pieces for each of the different attachment styles to kind of give some insight. Like anxious avoidant is, I need you to be okay in order for me to be okay. So you'll see an anxious person constantly like checking in. Are you all right? You seem a little off today. And what's really going on is that their internal state is disrupted. They need to know, are you actually all right? Is everything okay with you before they can be all right? So there's a lot of externalization. There's a lot of oftentimes love bombing, like let me give you a whole bunch of love that you will hopefully give to me in return, right? And so Dr. Robert Glover calls those covert contracts. I'm going to give you something with the unspoken expectation that I get something back in return. Anxious people do this all the time. I'm going to try and do everything for you, make everything good for you so that hopefully you ease my internal state, you ease my anxiety and help me feel better. Avoidance are the flip side of that. It's, I don't need you in order for me to be okay. I'm better on my own. And so avoidants tend to, as soon as things start to get more close and intimate, they will start to pull away from the relationship because in their past, intimacy, closeness, that was the threat. Relationship was the threat. Whereas for the anxious, not having relationship was the threat. So you can think about a baby being left for too long, maybe mom's kind of tuned out quite a bit and she's kind of spaced out or she's super busy and the baby's left by itself a lot. That'll create anxiety within a baby, right, over time. Or on the flip side of the spectrum, it'll induce a kind of shutdown, like, screw it, relationship's not safe, I'm not dealing with this. I don't want to be involved in a relationship. So avoidance, it's, I'm better off on my own. I'm better off on my own. I'm safer on my own. There's not really anybody else I can trust but me. It's not safe for me to express who I am in the relationship fully. And so what you usually find with avoidance is that the relationship will kind of reach this peak, this place where all of a sudden there's some closeness and some intimacy starting to happen, and they'll start to pull away. Or if things have gone too well, the things have gone well for too long, they'll kind of throw a grenade in. They'll pick a fight, pick an argument, and you know what? I'm not talking to you for 2 days, right? And they'll just peace out. And then the last one that I'll give you, and there's sort of variations on this, but the last one is disorganized. And the disorganized is basically a variant on both avoidant and anxious combined. So the way that I like to look at it is that the disorganized just does not have a strategy to do relationship or to make and maintain connection. So the anxious is, I'm anxious around connection and relationship. The avoidant is, I'm hesitant and mistrustful of relationship. And the disorganized is, I just don't know how to do this. I don't have a strategy to make or maintain continuous connection. So I just said a bunch. So maybe I'll just pause there.
And so should everybody, when they're in a relationship, be looking around thinking, which one are you? And then I'm going to deal with you accordingly? Or should they be aware of that? You said it was one of the most powerful theories that you're aware of. Is that important? Because I wouldn't necessarily have looked at relationships through that lens, friends or intimate relationships.
I don't think that we need, lots of people in the therapeutic space go down the path of like, I'm an anxious attached, I'm a fearful, disorganized, those types of labels are more for the clinician. It's more for the person that's working with a client or a patient than it is for the actual individual. I think one of the challenges of modern day social media is therapy speak is everywhere. And people are self-diagnosing and diagnosing everybody else around them. You see a video on the internet and you're like, that person's a narcissist.
Yeah.
So this isn't about pathologizing yourself or your partner. This is more about understanding the behaviors and the decisions that lead to security and trust and intimacy in a relationship, and the behaviors that don't. And then maybe if you start to notice, like, actually, I really eject from a relationship a lot, or every time I get into a relationship, I'm an anxious, complete mess and disaster. I text bomb the crap out of the other person. Then maybe you might want to go and understand those topics. But otherwise, what's helpful is understanding what actually builds security in a relationship. That's the important piece.
Yeah, I'm avoidant for sure. Yeah, my parents got divorced. I was like, these relationships are dangerous. They're gonna hurt you. So I was like that. I figured that out real early. And now I just try to catch myself when I see myself about to blow something up or running away. And having kids helps, because now you have a relationship that it's not going anywhere, and it can cause you pain. And if you take the extreme scenarios of something bad happening that cause you a lot of pain, but they're not going anywhere because I have to take care of them, I would say that's a nice way to get yourself used to a relationship that you can be like, okay, I can do this. You know, I don't have to avoid this. I don't have to sabotage this, and maybe it works elsewhere, or maybe not. What is the mother wound and mommy issues? Something you talk about, and I feel like it's important to talk about, because I don't know if men really talk about this that much.
Yeah, I mean, there's sort of like different variants or iterations of the mother wound, but a couple different things. Essentially, a mother wound is the pain that a man will have experienced at not having the love or nurturing that he needed from his mom. So his mom may have been invasive, the sort of stage 5 clinger mom that was constantly all over him, checking on everything. As soon as he's hurt, oh my God.
What the London Real Investment Club actually does for you, it gives you the keys to open that door to the inside deals. In the last 3 weeks, I've participated in 3 incredible deals: a layer 2 Bitcoin protocol, an incredible AI protocol. The deal flow is beyond what I expected. I don't think I've ever seen a model like this that just gives average folks the opportunity to be behind the deals. And that's exactly what we've done. Not only that, you get to hang out with Brian Rose every week. And for me, that was huge, because I look at Brian as somebody who's not only an expert in the space, and I think is on the leading edge, but just the leading edge of thought with London Real and the work he's doing there. To anyone who's taking a serious look at this, I know it's a big decision. It was a big decision for me and my family, and it is one of the best decisions I've ever made. So I wish you all the best, and hope you come join us.
Gosh, my baby, and he's like 15 years old, kind of smothering him and all over him. That type of invasiveness actually sort of penetrates through our boundaries as a person. So that can feel like, oh, women aren't really safe because they're going to try and make their way in a way that I actually don't really like and appreciate. So that's kind of the smother mother, or the stage 5 clinger. Another version of it is the ghost mom. And so that's the mom that's kind of checked out. She's not really super present. Maybe she's around, but she's kind of occupied with her career. She's kind of maybe a workaholic, and you don't really have a sense of who she is. She's not super loving, warm, nurturing, or kind. And then there's the tyrant mom, the mom that just like, she runs the house. You know who the boss is. She makes it clear that she's the boss. And it creates this very interesting kind of imbalance in the household where she runs the show. Dad doesn't really have much of a spine, doesn't stand up for himself. And so the boy has to start to kind of cater to whatever mom wants. And that can create this dichotomy of either that boy continuing to be a man who then sort of kowtows to women and never actually stands up for himself and is truly deeply afraid of women, or a man who has an extreme level of anger and distrust towards women. And it can be very hard for that type of man to be in relationship with somebody, because...
To continue watching the rest of the episode for free, visit our website londonreal.tv or click the link in the description below.